Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of series that I want to binge in 2021, and by that I don't mean series I've already started that I want to finish. I mean that I want to start and finish either a completed series or whatever is out of these series. Obviously, it's much easier to binge young adult series because typically the books are shorter, they're a little easier to get through, but I do have quite a few adult fantasy works on this list as well. But anyway, jumping right into it and starting with one of the young adult ones, we have Rebel Rose, which is the first book in the Queen's Council series. This was sent to me by Disney Book Group, and they are kindly sponsoring today's video, but this story sounds so cool because basically it takes Disney princesses and then sets them in historical settings. So in this particular story, we follow Belle, and it's kind of like what if Happily Ever After was actually the beginning of the story. So we're following Belle as she is getting accustomed to her new role, having more powers, becoming queen, missing her former life just a little bit. All of this is happening during the French Revolution. I'm a big fan of the trope of somebody coming into power, having to fulfill new obligations, new duties, but on top of that, there's supposed to be a lot of sacrifice and love, and I just love that blend of things together. On the back, we have some blurbs by some other authors saying that Emma Terrio, the author of this book, has blended fairy tale and history together masterfully, and I've always said that besides fantasy, historical fiction is my next favorite genre. So when you can get historical fantasy that's done well and it's a retelling of a story that's familiar, I just think all those things combined together sound fantastic. Next up, we have an adult fantasy trilogy, which would be The Emperor's Blades. This is the first book in the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, and this particular series, I remember seeing one other person talk about it, and they had a lot of good things to say, and I've never heard anybody else say anything about it, but every time I go to my local used bookstore, I would see books 2 and or 3, and never book 1, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I gotta find book 1 somehow, and then I ended up buying books 2 and 3 because I was like, well, they're here. So I got them, and then I finally ended up getting book 1, and I'm like, well, now I have the whole trilogy. Next up is Dark of the West. This is a story that came highly recommended by Rosaria Munda, who is the author of Fireborn, which I loved, and this particular story, again, kind of has a historical fantasy feel to it. You have a character who's actually a fighter pilot, and you are following this particular character who is the son of a general, and then you're following another character who is a princess, the daughter of a queen, and one of them has to go to the other's court and basically spy for their family, except for they might actually start to fall in love with the other person, and I just think it sounds like a good time. It's not the most unique premise ever, but I do like that it's fantasy, but not in your typical medieval-esque setting. I'm enjoying branching out and finding these different time periods to influence fantasy works, and I'm super excited to see where this one goes. I've heard really good things. Next up, we have The Queen's Rising, and again, I never get tired of characters coming into their own, having to ascend to the throne, having to navigate politics. I never get tired of that, and I've heard really good things about this series. I've heard it's very underrated, and it comes pretty highly recommended from one of my favorite Bookstagram accounts, Kinds of Insanity. I'll have them linked down below. Their feed is beautiful, it's so pretty. The aesthetic of it all is just very, very nice. But they have said quite good things about this series, and I've had it for a while. I think I got this first one in a book box randomly, and I've had it on my TBR for quite some time, so I'm ready to binge this series. Next up would be Codex Alera by Jim Butcher. I have heard this is basically Pokemon for adults, which I'm very down for, and I don't dislike Jim Butcher's writing. I just feel like I haven't found the Butcher series for me, and I'm hoping that this will be it. I've mentioned this in the past. I mentioned it in a recent video about older fantasy that I want to pick up, and this is a completed series. I believe there are 6 books in the series, and because of my wonderful local used bookstores, I own all of them because I saw them all for sale, and I mentioned this one was only $5 and I had store credit, so I think I got the whole series for free. But either way, I am hoping that what I can do if I really like this series is just read one every other month and then I'll be finished with it. Next up would be the Last Namsara, and I'm so sorry, I currently don't have the sleeve on it, but I'll put the image up on the screen. I believe this is a dragon fantasy story where the dragons actually play a huge role in the story. I've heard really good things, and on top of all of that, I don't know if I'll actually be able to do this, but I sort of want to have a dragon readathon sometime next year. I'm thinking when the sequel to Fireborn comes out, to Flamefall, that I might do that, and it comes out around my birthday in March, and I love dragons. It just feels very fitting, and I'm hoping to maybe read that then. But in the meantime, if you are looking for dragon fantasy, I believe Books with V has done a whole like secret dragon TBR, so definitely check out her channel so that you can get all the inside scoop on some dragon fantasy. Next up would be the Book of Klee. This particular story, when I found it at my bookstore, was sold in the adult sci-fi section, so I had a hard time finding it initially, but that's where I found my copy. And I don't have much to say besides my friend Jade, when she described it, I was like, that sounds like the video game Horizon Zero Dawn a little bit. And then right after I had that thought, she said, it kind of reminded me of Horizon Zero Dawn. So I was like, okay, I'm sold. So I really want to read this and pick up the rest of the series. Next up, we have Sleeping Giants. This comes highly recommended by another one of my friends, Jessie, from the channel Jessie May. She loved this trilogy. She said it's basically like the grown-up version of the Illuminae files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and it does also have the kind of mixed medium a little bit, but I don't think it has it quite to the extent as that series. I think it has the almost like text conversation type of storytelling, but not necessarily the weird, like, intricate, the words are all over the page sort of thing that Illuminae had. But either way, Jessie says that this is a great science fiction story. I definitely do want to get more into sci-fi. I just feel like I never know where to start because I'm kind of picky with sci-fi. But she says this one definitely explores themes of what would society do if this particular thing happened, which I don't want to say because I'm not sure if it's a spoiler. On the topic of what would society do, we have a Neil Shusterman book. We have the Unwound series. This particular story sounds really morbid because basically the idea is that children's body parts up until the age of, I believe, 18 a person can basically be killed and then their body parts taken and put in other people as like a donor. And then they're still considered alive, so their families can basically like get rid of them if they don't really like their kid because they're not actually killing them. It sounds very fascinating, and I have heard that you absolutely, as you kind of have to with that premise, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit and just go into it and be like, okay, this is where we're at. Let's see how society would act and what the repercussions of this decision would be. And so you're following characters that have to deal with the fear that they are going to be unwound. And I just think that sounds really interesting. And last on the list, we have Onyx and Ivory. First off, this cover, so pretty. I always say that there are certain things that if you put on the cover, I'm probably gonna like it. And that's birds. That's one of them. If you put a beautiful bird on a cover and if you put a beautiful tree on the cover. So I love this cover. But either way, I believe this story is basically a lovers to enemies and then back to lovers again. It's like a childhood, we used to really like each other and then some really bad stuff happened and now I hate you. But then like our paths cross again and I'm pretty sure they're gonna end up liking each other again. But there's gonna be lots of tension. And I know that this particular story has flightless dragons. It has drakes in it. And it just sounds really fascinating, really interesting. And I believe when I picked this book up at wherever I ended up getting it, and I mentioned it in a book haul, one of you messaged me and was like, I loved that book. It is so underrated. I wish more people would read it. And I was like, dang it. I wanted to drop everything that I had on my TBR at the time and pick it up, but I had to wait. And I want the wait to be over because I really want to read this. That's it for a bunch of series that I want to binge in 2021. Thank you again to Disney Book Group for sending me Rebel Rose, the first book in the Queen's Council series. I can't wait to start it, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Definitely check out this book and all the others in the description bar down below. I'll see you guys later. Bye.